All right. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and everything possibly in between. It has been quite a chunk of time since we last did an anatomy crosscast session, with our last episode hosting Donovan Parchment, Alex Norse, and other members of Ice Satan, which is a slowly progressing symphonic deathcore slash death metal band in the scene, as they have recently unveiled and just unfolded their four-song debut EP, The Eld Deltament, now available on all streaming platforms. Really, really solid episode and an awesome opportunity to have Donovan Parchment back onto the Crosscast, this show in the first place, with the debut session featuring him regarding Disembodied Tyrant, which is another phenomenal band in that subgenre that is climbing the ranks right now. And while we have yet to hear updates regarding their new split EP with Synestia, that being the Poetic Ada, but with the major Norse elements, lyrically speaking, the orchestral elements that remind people of Shadow of Intent, it is with every intention that I hope to host both Synestia and Disembodied Tyrant on the podcast in the near future. But today is a very, very special day, at least to me. For this session, this episode, we are hosting someone, an artist, not a musician, not a band, but we are hosting a phenomenal, a very famous graphic artist in the counterculture music scene. I mean, hell, most of my wall right now, that being Awaken Providence's Eternity. You can't really see it right now, but Warm Shepherd's Ritual Hymns. He participated in the graphic layout assets for Lorna Shore's Pain Remains. This guy has been doing a lot of amazing and spectacular things for the scene, not only this year, but since I've been following him, and of course before that, because his legacy, his reputation precedes him. We are speaking with the amazing Caelan Stokkermans today. This is an awesome opportunity. This is an opportunity and something different that I've been trying to do for a long time. But with Caelan being as big and vital as a graphic artist and an artist in general as he has been, I didn't really want to bother him per se. But just out of nowhere, I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and see what we can do. Let's go ahead and see what date we can secure, how much time we can secure. And well, it is again the 8th of November. We are here. I'm very excited. Literally butterflies in my chest or butterflies in my stomach, as someone who's trying to also participate in the graphic art design medium to design logos, album covers, single artwork, and basically compact what is Renaissance era paintings, as well as other eras, of course, but turning those very, very intelligent art forms into album covers for some of the heaviest bands in the scene. It has been something that's been intriguing me for a long time, with artists like Caelan Stokkermans, Caesar Eldrian, and Elryan Gantor. There are so many artists that have embraced this niche, and it is just beautiful to see it becoming more popular. But I'm sure Caelan himself can speak on behalf of the legacy, the mark that he's made on the scene, working with some of the most prominent bands in deathcore, period, in recent times. But for starters, that way it's not just a crescendo and just like climbing up a mountain of, oh my gosh, we have this guy here. How are you doing today, man?
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean. I'm doing good.
Good, good. Well, for starters, obviously, this is going to be a very different session because we're not exactly doing lyrical dissection onto an album, but per se, we are digging through the entire catalog, or at least some of the major pieces. We'll just be talking all things art, artist to artist, me a lot less known, having no original pieces out, but hoping to accomplish just that someday. Also being intrigued by calligraphy, as it seems Mr. Stokkermans here is as well, for he has not only that major catalog of original pieces that he's done, but he's also done logos for many bands who have been featured on my podcast, logos who have been featured in a lot of my videos. Needless to say, it's awesome to have you on. It's awesome to welcome a new creative medium onto the show. So, usually on the Anatomy Crosscast, we have the first part of the podcast, which is the people part of the podcast. And that is usually digging into your history, digging into your legacy, maybe not the fine and nitty gritty details as in respect to any privacy you wish to sustain, basically. But this is the closest thing I can get to being David Attenborough on National Geographic talking about any animals or any major geographical locations around the world that he does. In that first half, we'll be talking as much as we can about you as a person, where you grew up, how you got involved in your creative medium, and most likely, because again, this is not going to be covering any specific albums, but instead the artwork and the visuals behind them. I think most of this session will indeed be us just talking with you as an artist, kind of digging into your head as much as possible in respect to your privacy and your any secrecy that you might wish to sustain. And we're just here to like talk about you. We're here to talk about drawing, art, digital painting, all that stuff. Maybe some advice you have for any to be an up and coming artist, all that type of fun stuff. You did say you were well. I'm very excited about the session. So if anything, what I would want to do is immediately dive into a scenario of you just kind of getting up and standing up before an elementary level class or something similar, right? It's the start of the semester. This is a brand new class of about like 10 to 20 people. Everybody is somewhat interested in what you have to say. Maybe even your first impression is really the thing that piques people's interest afterwards. That's how you make friends. That's how you can make connections. But if anything, what I'd like to start off with is your name, basically, again, what you do for the scene, and maybe where you've grown up most of your life, or maybe where you've most recently settled, geographically speaking.
Okay. So as it was said, my name is Caelan Stokkermans. I'm a freelance artist, and art director at Unique Leader Records. I've been working in the metal and music scene for about, I think it's been about 8, 9 years now. I started pretty young, I guess, per se. I started around, I think, 17, 18. Just kind of doing artwork in high school for local bands. And yeah, I'm located in Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up in Ohio most of my life. I've traveled quite a bit. I did a short stint in the UK studying abroad. So that's the only place I've really lived besides Ohio. My artistic background, mostly self-taught. I never went to art school. Just me kind of fucking around and in a dark tomb, coming up with shit. So, but yeah, I mean, my influence as an artist is, as you said, I'm influenced a lot by old masters and Baroque style painting. My sort of cultural background is my dad is European and my mom is Indian. So I kind of have a mix of both those two cultures. So that's kind of a lot where a lot of my influence comes from. So, I gravitate towards European art in my artwork style. The sort of Indian and Hindu mythology and stuff is kind of very much an influence from a child growing up. The multi-headed deities and multi-armed deities and sort of fantastical, mythical sort of tales are a lot, at least what I, kind of draw upon, and then kind of represent in my own sort of like old masters European style. Yeah, I don't know, some bands I've worked with, Lord Ashore, I did the Immortal cover, I worked with them up until Pain Remains. I work with a lot of bands on the Unique Leader roster, of course. Couple of like major names, I guess, would be Acacia Strain, did Slow Decay in their last release, Failure Will Follow and Step into the Light. Um, see, Cattle Decapitation I've worked with. Um, there's a long list.
Yeah, there's a big list.
There's a long list. If you go on my website, I try to list as many bands as I can remember. But yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty you know, I guess prevalent, I guess you'd say, in the underground niche that I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's been really interesting because really my following of your work had to start back in 2020, truly, with that within Destruction's yokai and like your involvement in those major assets. At this time, I cannot confirm to myself whether or not you were like the primary artist, or if were you the primary artist or like the graphic layout designer per se.
Yeah, just the graphic layout. I think Fuck Render is the one who did the cover.
Right.
But yeah, I'm friends with Luca, so usually it's me because I did their Death Wish layout way
Right.
back. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah. And so it really started for me when I saw your involvement with Yokai and its graphic layout assets. And then I saw your work with Immortal. I saw your work with Crown Magnetar. I think Bog Wraith was another client. If not something very similar, another one of those two word deathcore bands that are just starting out and that were in that same tier alongside Bog Wraith and Crown Magnetar at the time, which is like so long ago now. It's crazy. But it really started with that. And I'm like, whoa, okay, so you do have these other artists like Eldian Cantor and Caesar Eldrian, which Caesar is mostly known for Infinite Annihilators, I think. I think the egg, it's the purple one.
Yeah.
He was involved with that, and then eventually he also got involved with my buddies, my personal friends, in Shrine with Sheol and the major assets for that. And then I did notice that you were involved with what was supposed to be the cover for their latest album, Oberith, before they had to like kind of go underground. And I was like, oh shit, okay, that's pretty cool. Um, but other than that, it's like just everything since then, dude. The way I've seen you climb up the ladder in the scene and become a bigger and bigger and bigger artist. And then obviously Jamie Graham and the boys in Unique Leader Records, they're like, you know what? This guy is like super relevant. We should scoop him up or something like that. And since then, you've been the art director and the graphic art director for Unique Leader Records. And I'll tell you what, dude, ever since you jumped on, if it wasn't for me being broke most of the time, I would have so much more of the Unique Leader Records merch spreads, period. Because there's something fresh, there's something different, and it's always something brand new with every band. And I appreciate the variety in the arrangements of these major assets, whether it be on the sleeves, on the front. You understand. It's just really, really fresh to not just see a long sleeve that has the old English version of the Unique Leader Records logo on one sleeve, and that's just the whole thing. And then sometimes before you came in, that would be all that was on one of the sleeves. And then on the other sleeve, it would be nothing. And I was like, I mean, I get it because it's for the record label. It's like you're an artist on this record label. We want our logo on your sleeve. Boom. Like I have no idea the details because I am not officially involved with Unique Leader Records on any professional level. I only happen to associate myself with at least like 5 or 6 bands on the roster now. But it was just really fresh to see how everything evolved and how everything improved once you finally dove into that. But that's more or less a more recent endeavor, right? It's a major milestone, and congratulations on getting into that spot because not many artists, I don't think, and I haven't seen, have had the opportunity to do something like that and just be given that seat in the creative chambers of a major record label for deep underground counterculture music, home of the heavy, you know what I mean? But I wanted to go ahead and rewind it a little bit, right? Because we got that elementary level introduction put out there. The class is kind of aware of who you are. They're like, oh, so his mom was Indian, his dad was European. Like that the more simple stuff like that would usually click with the average 12-year-old. And either 12-year-old, geez, in middle school, then we'll just go with middle school. Because they're learning about new things, but there's still some things that they're not really focusing on. So naturally that would kind of point out to them. So I want to go ahead and rewind, go as deep as possible and into as much detail as you can recall. Let's go ahead and start at the very beginning. Like, when do you remember starting really engaging into drawing, painting, doing graphic art design? I want to hear about that whole journey, because for me, it's mostly been graphic arts. I've been doing chicken scratch logos since elementary school for projects that never became anything. I was always fascinated by logos because that's the first impression for any professional organization. You see that logo and you're like, okay, so they seem pretty tight knit, or maybe they're more fun because the logo has more of a graffiti vibe associated with it. It's like, this is kind of punk or whatever, but it's a professional bakery or something. And it's also interesting to see shops, restaurants, that type of thing, through artists such as Art of Darkness. It's interesting to see that not only are there bands, but there are also shops wanting deathcore versions of their logos and stuff, for merch or whatever.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and start at the beginning, man. What got you started with even just a small little drawing? Maybe there was something you drew specific and you're like, no, this looks like shit. I need to be better. And, you kept improving, because that's the homework, right? That's how you truly get started as an artist. So, like, what was the thing that kind of kickstarted you into that journey?
So I mean, I always wanted to do something with music. I mean, music was a big part of my life, ever since I was a kid. So originally I used to do music production throughout like freshman, sophomore year of like high school. And then once I realized that I kind of sucked at it, I started getting into graphic design and stuff. My first ever album cover was because I would like, I would do what you do like in school, doodle on my binder, and I was really back into the like those big graphic t-shirts. Back in the day, the ones that you'd see Dan Mumford do with like the Black Dahlia Murder and like
Yeah.
Day to Remember and like all those bands. And it was, really cartoony kind of graphic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those I really like, for me that was kind of a very accessible thing to draw. They were already not very technical. So, I would draw a lot of stuff like that. And my first ever like album cover thing was there was like a local punk band that I was like showing my friend who was friends with I was also friends with the band, but friends with the band. And he showed it to them and they're like, yeah, we'd love to use this. It was like a tree house or something. It was like a dilapidated looking tree house. I remember what the band's name and like planks or something really elementary. But yeah, that was like my first ever commission, and it was a really cool feeling just like having like a CD my art on it.
Yes.
Um, and I wish I still had it. I think I gave it to some ex or something, and she burned it or some
Uh,
shit. um, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean that was like kind of really where I got started, and then I just would mess around during my free time during lunch and stuff in high school, like designing logos. I think for me, it wasn't really, I kind of got into digital right away. I would go on like DAF font and I would like take the logos and I would like, put them in a free version of Photoshop I had, or go to the photo lab and use their like ancient drawing tablet.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I mean, and then from there it was just kind of posting my work in forums on like Facebook. The biggest way I got actually the I kind of got like started in a bit of a weird way. I created this compilation album thing on SoundCloud or whatever, and it was like a bunch of like technical like death metal and like gent bands. Actually, Enterprise Earth way back when their
Oh
first
shit.
started was on this compilation. So back when, because I was friends with Dan, um, or I was friends with, I think it was actually BJ was the guy who was in became friends with Dan. But yeah, it was Enterprise Earth. It was like all these weird bands, and then like some crappy like recording I did with my band. And a lot of those bands I ended up like just kind of doing work for, like doing logos or whatever, merch designs. Um, and yeah, and then from there it was just kind of doing that, and I'm like you make like a couple bucks on the side and spend it on magic cards or whatever. Um, and then
Sure.
yeah, and then I just kept doing it throughout like college. It just kind of started getting bigger and bigger from there.
Yeah.
Um, I started working with Lorna Shore way early in my career, and they were like one of the first bigger bands I worked with. So, and it was a lot of just word of mouth. I would post in Facebook forums. I don't know if you ever remember. I think it was like Gent Space or something. It was like the Gent Facebook community, something like that. And back when like Facebook groups were like a thing. Um, so I'd post like artwork. I'd be like, hey, does anyone need like artwork or whatever? And then some person would hit me up and I'd be like, okay, cool. And then I would just do that. Yeah, and then just kind of kept growing from there. I only started like really seriously doing this about 2 years ago after I graduated from my master's in business. And I was gonna go into like business or whatever, but I kept doing interviews and stuff, and they would always just talk about my artwork and like be like, what would you like to do as your dream job? And be like, what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
So yeah, so then I started doing that, and then and like I got the position at Unique Leader. I reached out to Jamie. I was like, hey, I'm looking for a position, or if you know any jobs, because I've done work with Unique Leader throughout the years. And he was like, I'm actually putting together a team right now, so if you want to, be perfect fit. So that really helped. That kind of made it a lot easier for me to, because I get paid like contractually, so I get paid like yearly.
Yeah.
And so just because as a freelance artist, it's really hard to kind of sustain a living without something keeping me
Exactly.
going on the side. So yeah, so I really appreciate working with Jamie and the team. They're a great bunch of people to work with. And the bands are all awesome too. Perfect fits my niche and a lot of the bands I've actually worked with before. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's kind of really where I got started and how I got started. I mean, I worked primarily digitally, and then only recently have I started like I started doing like so I used to do like matte paintings, so kind of how they do like video games. So they
Yeah.
you use kind of like photo assets and stuff to kind of speed up your process. And I nowadays I just do basically as if I was just painting traditional. I kind of felt a little bit like using photos and stuff was too much of a handicap, or I wasn't really learning the stuff that I should be. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got my start, and for the most part. Hopefully, I think that hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. No, it answered that and many more questions.
Oh, okay.
Simply said. So like as someone who's like trying to get into graphic arts and seeing these major artists, including yourself, um pros- prospering the way they are and on the level that they are, it's like I guess my first question from a more personal standpoint, trying to get into that field, is like, how do you usually get these pieces put together? Because like it looks like so much. And then when you translate what is like a traditional painting style into digital, in which you have your time lapses, and I love seeing those. It's my favorite thing ever because you get to see how it is constructed, but that's more or less a visualizer, right? And that is a compilation of like so much time that goes into these pieces. I can only imagine it's at least more than a couple hours, even if you are a seasoned artist, because you want to invest so much story and thought into these pieces. So, speaking more recently with some of your more regular clients as you've become a part of Unique Leader Records, first question would be, how do you usually get your pieces started?
So usually I'll talk about commission work because I mean that's usually what people see. And but so for commission work, I'll usually get a band. It used to be more when I was first starting out, the bands would kind of like provide most of the details and the ideas. But now that I'm more established as an artist, I usually ask the bands for like kind of like a general idea of what they're trying to go for, and like lyrics and stuff, or like, you know, if there's like a theme to the album, you know, if it's like about depression or, you know, whatever it is. And then I'll take that and I'll kind of come up with like concept like based off of that. Like so I'll come up with composition, I'll come up with kind of like, you know, all the details and stuff. Um, and then from there I'll usually just I'll do like thumbnail sketches. So I'll do small thumbnail sketches, kind of I'll do like I try to do at least 10, just to get the idea down. If it's like if I know exactly what it is from like the get-go, I'll usually do like one or like two or three. Um, but if it's like more of a difficult concept or I don't have an exact image in my head at the time, I'll kind of do a couple of thumbnails, and usually they'll be based off of like several motifs that I've kind of come up with based on whatever the band, you know, whatever the band's concept is. So like if it's about, oh, I don't know, like the Crown Magnetar, like uh recent painting, Everything Bleeds. Their whole concept was they wanted to kind of depict like sort of eternal pain and suffering. And for me, like a lot of religious themes are a big part of like my work and also what we did in the previous two covers that I did with them. So I kind of wanted to do like a version of Christ crucified because like that's like, you know, the most recognizable theme of like eternal pain and suffering. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of what I'll do. So I'll come up with a motif. So like it'll be like Christ crucified or whatever, and then I'll kind of expand upon it. So it'll be like, you know, I'm not literally gonna show like just do painting the crucifixion of Christ. I'll do that. It'll be like, you know, their whole theme's demonic, so it'll be like kind of a demonic version of it, and then you know, you kind of build up from there. It's like it's sort of what, you know, they'll do. They sort of teach you a lot in the video game industry more than anything. I think is you'll have like a concept, like so you'll have like say you're supposed to do like a I don't know, turtle or something that's like has a cannon or something on it. Um, you'll do like a very basic version of it, and then like you do like very over the top version of it, and you find like somewhere between those two.
Ooh,
A
okay.
little bit, sort of kind of what I do in my thought process. Um, so yeah, so that's usually I come up with a concept. Also, I'm a very visual sort of person, so and I read a lot, so kind of developed a way of like so when I read something, I'll immediately sort of get an image in my mind,
Yeah.
and then I'll and also years of practice, you know, kind of like
Yeah.
years of doing this, you know, I kind of built up a visual library. Um,
Yeah, I can
yeah, so
see. It's
then
right behind you.
yeah, that well, yeah, that and just, you know, experience and just, you know, trying to yeah, that's a kind of segueing a little bit. The biggest thing I feel like for if you're an artist and you're trying to, you know, be creative, the biggest thing is to not like look at other people in the industry's work. Go
Yes.
outside of it. Go like do like, you know, look read books or whatever. Like a lot of my stuff comes from like the occult and like mysticism and stuff. So
That's sick.
um which is, you know, the metal themes, but like, you know, I
Yeah.
try not to be like, oh, I'm gonna work on a painting and I'm gonna go look at Ellery Cantor or like, you know, Adam Brooks work because it's like I don't want to be
You don't
that
want that creative pollution.
exactly. Yeah, you wanna be your own thing. So yeah, so that'll be what I'll do, and then thumbnail sketch, and then from thumbnail sketch I'll do a line drawing, usually in Photoshop. Um, and they're, you know, more concrete drawing, and then my levels. I mean, if you've seen my time lapses, you'll see like I'll do an underpainting, which is the same way, you know, old masters do it. So underpainting, and then build up layers. I usually work in sections, so I'll start like here, like on the demon's face, whatever, and then
Yeah.
sort of work my way around the canvas. I know some artists, you know, they do it a little bit differently. They kind of put down a bunch of textures and paint and stuff, and then build the shapes out of that. I mean, there's like, you know, there's countless ways of approaching a
Yeah,
painting,
there's
but
countless ways. But after
yeah,
all, the session is for you. So it's like, what do you do? You know what I mean? And you're
yeah,
providing a pretty good deep dive so far because all of your pieces, again, that I even have on my wall at this moment, just looking at all of them, it's like there's so much time and like thought that goes into these. I think one of my most recent pieces by you has to be Everything Bleeds because not only did you do kind of a parody of a major religious event, that being Christianity, the crucifix, not only that though, but you also put their logo as a throne that this dude is sitting in. And I was like, that is so genius for like the sake of identity for the band, because the two prior pieces to that being Alone in Death and the Codex of Flesh. In the Codex of Flesh, you have the guy who has the Crown Magnetar sigil on his hand, and this dude like probably Beelzebub or something like that, very similar. Just this like very insectoid demon dude, and then you have all the lotuses swarming behind him. That makes the album cover more like desolate, more dystopian, more apocalyptic. And then Alone in Death is like it just the piece to me kind of speaks upon the dusk on maybe the dusk or the finale upon something temporary in mindset. And it's like, well, now I've slit the throat of the lamb. And unfortunately, because of that, maybe because there were no other characters on the Alone in Death EP cover, it's like this character is now truly alone in death for when their death arrives. Or maybe the lamb after the slitting, after the sacrifice, they are alone in death because there's no one there to save them. And it's very melancholy, it's very dark, but it's just so geniusly just designed, and just obviously you're painting a picture for everybody to see, and that's your impression upon the EP and all the music contained in it. And therefore, I guess one other question I had regarding the creative process is, do you ever have the opportunity to listen to this album and then kind of utilize the contents of the album to also assist you with the design of the EP covers? Or is it usually just kind of like a silent session? Is there other music you listen to kind of help you fine tune and zone into the piece? Like, is there anything like that going on usually?
So it will depend. Sometimes bands will have the album finished before they look for our work. Um, Alone in or Everything Bleeds. I worked on a while before I did the band. We had discussions about it, I think, a while before they had started recording, but they had a pretty good idea of what they wanted. Um, so yeah, so I mean, it'll depend. Like sometimes the bands will have stuff done, and I'll listen to it and kind of get a general idea. Um, Usually, I mean, my personal music taste is a lot of like death metal and black metal, and like stuff outside of the genre, a lot of indie and stuff like that. I don't really listen to too much deathcore as much anymore. I try not to listen to a lot of bands in the genre that I work in. Once again, kind of trying not to cross pollute or whatever with
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I tried like, especially with my recent work, because I've recently kind of really found the style that I want to work. A lot of it is, I'm trying to convey a sense of like desolation or just a sense of like atmospheric or melancholy, melancholy. A lot of like the old masters. So a lot of black metal is a lot like that, when it actually sounds good or well recorded. But but yeah, so that's usually what I listen to. Currently I've been listening to Worm and Dream Unending just released this sick split EP. So I've been listening to that and the new Sulfur Aeon album. So
Sweet. That's awesome. What is your like best case scenario when it comes to sitting down and like getting the process started? Like, I guess artist to artist, what do you have to have in front of you or around you to really like zone in and prepare to get these pieces started?
yeah, so I'll usually build a reference board of like paintings and stuff that I like. I use this software called Pure Ref that basically creates like a big like sort of like surface you can just drag stuff into. Um,
Oh,
so that's super useful. So I'll do that just to kind of get like a general idea of the composition and stuff. Usually it'll be like old masters works that I'll pull in. Um, I'll also reference a lot from books that I have. I have quite a few on the occult, a lot of stuff on like, religion and mythology and all that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've kind of built my studio space to kind of inspire me. I mean, I have this huge painting of I have a bunch of shit plugged in, but oh wait, God, I'm using my camera. Um, I'll try to move this and see.
Okay.
But there's this
Sweet.
massive painting I have here,
Oh, wow.
Peter Paul Rubens, and then various other artists that I admire usually. I'm just gonna get this thing back.
You're fine.
Um, yeah, so like yeah, so I kind of designed the space to be. I used to have a lot of my own art up, but it kind of just felt like an echo chamber of my own shit. So I just
Yeah. Yeah. Like you don't want to be inside your own head
yeah,
metaphysically too much because then you're like, well, if I have all this other stuff surrounding me that I've already done, it almost causes, I can only imagine a different form of creative pollution. It's like, I don't want to copy what's around me. I want it to be original. So, with that in mind, it's like, of course, you have certain textures from other artists, but you don't exactly have the album covers or the single artwork or any artwork for that matter from those other artists that we both mentioned before now on your walls, because that would also more directly cause creative pollution. So I like that. That's actually really cool.
yeah. I mean, I'm trying to do my own thing. I mean, like I don't know. I always try to be against whatever the usual grain is to sound edgy or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like for me, I know there's a lot of artists that pull from like Basinski, I think is probably one of the greatest artists I can think of that, was just able to pull from just his dreams and like his own
Ooh,
kind
from
of
his
strange way
dreams.
of like, yeah, like way of seeing the world, or H.R. Geiger, or like I'm not, I wish I could be as like original as those guys, because like they're just like they just came up with something that nobody had seen before. But
Mm,
I don't know, maybe at one point maybe I'll find some crazy weird thing that I'll like run with. But
yeah.
yeah, for now, like it's a lot of just like, kind of being influenced by things that like you don't see existing in our current world.
Yeah.
So going to the old masters, and like for me, like the way that people in like the dark ages or whatever, like where there was a lot of like religious fear and stuff, and how
Yes.
everything was just kind of like seen through this lens of like sort of the monsters and
Yeah.
very creative ways of explaining how the world worked. For me, that is like a very fertile ground to pull from, because I feel like nowadays it's very like our world is very kind of cut and dry, almost in a sort of not very creative way of like thinking. It's all very scientific and very
Exactly.
cut and dry. So for me, I try to get away from a lot of the things that I see in the world around me, besides whatever I can, reference for,
Yeah.
well, technical, like drawing or whatever it is.
Look to those before.
Yeah.
Look to history, because the thing is, creatively speaking, the artists before, like there's a reason they're still talked about more than a century later. They did something that was very fresh, they did something that was very different. And since then, like even certain graphic art styles and mediums, they almost become saturated. And that's the main issue of today, is that because we are so interconnected on a global scale, you don't exactly have to take a massive trek or adventure to go see Japan. You can look up images of Japan on Google search. It allows this access to absolutely everything. And because of that less intimate, less physical experience, sometimes that can easily cause less soul to be ingrained and kind of like incorporated into the art, if that makes sense. So when you look to those before, that actually had to go on adventures, they had to do more to be inspired. It's like sometimes those are better sources to search for and to look to as far as making your own work. And in a very complex way, there's a certain nostalgia to it, because, well, nostalgia is a drug. Everybody likes to look to the past. Sometimes you get high off of it. Sometimes you get a bad high off of it and you remember things that you wish never happened. But for the most part, nostalgia has that more positive nature to it. It's appreciating what was present before and how things have changed since then, appreciating history. That's really what nostalgia is. Um, and on a more personal, more simple level, well, most people recognize nostalgia as the good old days, the good old memories. But when the nostalgia predates your existence by a couple centuries, there's just something different about it, but you're still able to engage. You can still be inspired by all of that. So really, really cool stuff. And I don't know, like speaking to a fellow graphic artist, one who is hella more seasoned than myself, and has a whole portfolio, a whole legacy before him. It's always interesting to have conversations like this to where, two people on different levels in that same field are able to like correlate so well and kind of get on the same uh, plane of thinking. But I guess my next question for you, good sir, and Mr. Stokkermans, not Stokkermans, Stokkermans. What have been some of your favorite pieces throughout your legacy, if you have any? If not, no pressure, because I'm sure they were all fun to work on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they were all like for me, like I've had people ask me like, have you ever thought about like revisiting like, an older piece or whatever, kind of update it too. And for me, those paintings or whatever that work was is kind of like a testament to that time for me. And sort of so because like who I am today is a different person than who I was when I painted that. So but for me, for projects at least that are favorites, usually the ones that are very creative, that I had a lot of like sort of uh creative energy from the band. The Acacia Strain Slow Decay was a really fun project for me, especially working with Vincent because we both I feel like draw from very similar sources of inspiration.
Oh shit,
Um,
that's cool.
yeah, he's a super cool guy. I'm actually going to see them next week. So, but,
Mm,
uh, but yeah, definitely like Slow Decay was a lot of fun. A lot of my recent work has been a lot of fun because I've kind of very found where what I want to say with my work, and how I want to say it. So for me, it's been a lot of being able to kind of do my own thing, instead because like a lot of before a lot of my work before was kind of directed by the band. It was a lot of the
mm,
band's vision, and nowadays I feel like it's a lot more of my vision, which
yeah,
is nice and kind of reinterpreting, which is I feel like how you should work with an artist. I mean, if
yes,
you hire somebody, you're working with them for what they are bringing to the table. So yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of really cool bands and unique leaders, especially who've been very like open to just letting me do my thing. So yeah, so working with Crown Magnetar is always a blast. I love working with their ideas. They're also super cool people, really
yeah,
very nice guys to know and to talk with. Yeah, so um, at least up until recently, Lauren Shore was a very fun band to work with,
yeah.
until they blew up and egos got in the way. But yeah, yeah. So those are a few. I mean, it's mostly I think bands. I think it's less projects. It's more just people that kind of make it a fun project. So
Right, absolutely. And I do have to say that the most recent participation that you had with Lorna Shore in forging the sigils that you did for person by person, I was like, oh my God, that's so sick. Like it has a very Slipknot vibe to it now with their on stage uniforms and stuff. Um, and I could easily be that person to ask, like, how did you decide upon that? And how did you decide upon the major assets for this band and that band? But here's the thing, that would take up way too much of your time. I already know. You're just like, well, I mean, when I was, when they finally sent me the album, this and this and that. So maybe for another time, we can continue branching upon this debut session and, absolutely up to you. I think that would be cool to kind of like talk with the artist and have a whole separate session, but that's a separate inquiry. We will discuss that at a later time. Because you're
Yeah,
very
I
busy,
know.
man. I know you are.
Always.
Always busy. Um, so I'm not sure if you meant to provide an answer to this question before, and if you did, I do apologize for not interpreting it correctly. But what would be your simplest advice to any artist who's trying to get started in this medium, whether it be logo design or something as grandiose as their album cover, designing their album cover? How would you, like, what are some of the lessons you've learned since you've started your journey and up to now, which you're pretty important to uniquely to records now? And I'll tell you what, man, one of my favorite record labels in the scene right now, because they're just scooping up artist after artist. But what would be what are some of the lessons you've learned? What would be some like the best advice you can give to new artists getting started?
I think the biggest or the best advice I could give would be to not take shortcuts. Definitely learn to how to draw. Like start from the basics. Like I feel like nowadays it's really easy for people to see like an artist like kind of crap out some, like amazing piece or whatever, but not really realize that like, and then be like, oh, I can do that, or like, try to find the easiest way to get to that point. So like the biggest thing is just, start from the fundamentals, whether or not it's if it's a logo design, learn how to do like calligraphy or learn like how to build like create font types or whatever it is. If it's like drawing, learn how to draw, learn how to, like do basic shapes, basic like form, all that stuff. Because for me, working in digital, and learning primarily in digital is very easy to take shortcuts and like especially because like I wasn't really doing this like seriously, I was doing this kind of like a like side thing. Um, so I'm kind of now I'm really learning that I need to go back and like relearn a lot of the basics and fundamentals and kind of retouch up on that even like once after I do a whole cycle of learning something or like project or whatever, going back and relearning what I did or relearning the fundamentals and because there's so much to learn. Like starting it from the beginning and not developing bad like habits is very important. So yeah, so that's the best advice I could give is just really learn your craft, and also figure out if like this is really what you want to do because um, I see a lot of artists and people who like will like see the end result and be like, yeah, I want to do that, then don't want to put in you got to learn to love the process, basically.
Yeah,
Try to say, yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And I like more specific of a question regarding your process, I guess. What is like the average time lapse or like how long does your average piece usually take to piece together?
I mean, I've never really like timed myself, but
Mm,
like it also will depend on the complexity of the concept in the painting. Like for example, the recent one I did for Volatile Ways with like I had to paint like
yeah.
9 demons and stuff that took like forever because I had to individually I had to paint every single body and form and stuff. But like I just finished and so that one it must take at least 40 hours, maybe more. I know some painters who like it takes them 70 to 100 hours for a painting. Um, but usually, I mean, I'll spend about a week to 2 weeks on one painting, usually about 2 weeks, and I work for about 4 to 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours a day. So math, yeah, that's like
Yeah.
about 30 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I ask that is because just like being in a band and being a musician or being a lyricist, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to get fine-tuned, develop your own style, and really get comfortable and decide whether or not that is something you want to do. I can tell you one thing for sure. I think the most time I've spent on a most recent piece, which just happens to correlate with a playlist that I compiled, turned into a YouTube video. I thought it'd be interesting to create an original piece revolving around that. But even like the first, I think, 3 hours of it, um, like maybe I want to say I've spent about 5 hours on it so far, just getting like the major idea together. Because it's a character. He's supposed to be my YouTube personality overlooking a valley, but there's a crack in the ground, and the valley is actually this giant monster with like golden teeth. And like the piece is supposed to be called Into the Unknown, and it regards the nature of how all the bands featured on this playlist featured in 2020. These are 2020 albums. It's like we were all descending into the unknown. And I just happened to think of the unknown, the pandemic, as this like endless, seemingly endless pit in the middle of a massive valley, somewhere in like the Mogollon Rim part of Arizona. And it's just like, okay, time to descend into the unknown. What does this sound like? And the ferocity behind all these albums is like the main inspiration behind it, because that's just, I guess that's the process I'm trying out right now. But even that piece is like rough sketch. I don't have most of the details compiled, and even that took about like 3 to 5 hours. But it's like my first major piece of anything since I was in elementary school. You go through the public school system, you're having to pay attention to that. And for someone like me who was also trying to engage in social life, I really only had time for the chicken scratch logos that I mentioned before. And then sometimes I would utilize time in a computer science class, and I would make logos in Microsoft Paint. They look like shit, but you got to start somewhere. And then I was introduced to Photoshop a little bit later, was immediately intimidated because I didn't know how layers worked. I didn't know how opacity worked. I didn't know how to move around major assets with a mouse. It was just different. But like once I migrated over to Procreate, which is the current program I'm using to make these newer pieces or try to get into that, it's like it's a lot better for me to like work on a tablet instead of a PC. Do you work with like a mouse, or do you work like on a tablet just in Photoshop?
I have a Cintiq tablet that I use. So
Sick. Yeah, so you've definitely moved beyond the point of just like using your mouse and like trying to jig jag all these like deathcore logos and stuff. I can only
yeah,
imagine.
no, yeah. But yeah, like actually bringing that up, for most people who are starting out, I highly recommend actually starting with traditional
Mm,
instead of digital, because traditional will kind of force you to learn good habits that because digital, the whole point of digital is for at least like painters and drawers, it's just supposed to speed up the process for you.
yeah,
Um, but a lot of
that's a shortcut.
yeah, it's a shortcut for a lot of artists. Because like actually, a lot of the artists you mentioned, like Cesar Adrian and Ellen Cantor and stuff, they actually use like photos and stuff in
Mm,
their work. I know Ellen Cantor, he's brilliant in what he does, but um, his work is meant to look like it's painted, but it has a lot of like photos kind of bashed into them. Which I think it just lends to his own like works flow. I mean, I think he does that mostly because like the concepts he works with bands are so diverse that if you try to paint, like trying to learn how to paint every single one of those things would be like impossible. So um oh, I think I think you the sound cut out.
this issue will be solved someday, I swear.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, I can
Happens
hear you.
every session. But yeah, because like if you're working with with a client who wants an image as diverse as you're mentioning, it's like depending on how complex it is, you could be working on that piece for a couple months instead of like maybe 40 hours, because there's so much you're having to work on. And that's not even talking about like the pixel resolution, right? And then eventually you'll just have to compact that image to the good old 1080 by 1080 or 2160 by 2160. um it's just there's a lot of work that goes into it, but I do appreciate the fact that you kind of dove into that mindset and kind of like fleshing that out, because there's so much more, I feel, except for sound engineering, right? Because those are the final details that musicians will work with. I mean, hell, I'm planning to enroll into a school soon for sound engineering, despite this conversation. Like, despite how passionate I am about graphic art design, it's like, well, most of the time you'll see sound engineers acquire more clientele consistently from band to band, uh, or at least that's the impression I've gotten so far. There's more opportunities, right, when it comes to sound engineering, but like maybe by a hairline. People still want their art, even if it's like completely CGI'd. It looks 3D, very similar to the Within Destruction Yokai cover, right? A lot of artists, a lot of musicians are embracing those newer forms, and well, sometimes people want to save certain financial resources, or maybe they're in a time crunch, so they instead resort to AI art, which that's a completely different conversation. I have very aggressive opinions regarding AI art, but
Yeah, me too. Me
well,
too.
I'm glad we agree on that. I don't know. Would you be willing to talk about that?
Yeah, we can talk about that for sure.
Okay. So in that case, being someone in your position, someone who is now not only like you're prominently the graphic art director for Unique Leader Records. So that means you operate with bands on their logo sometimes if they want to get it just refurbished, or just they want a little bit of a Stokkermans spice in there and they want to sharpen it up, which all of your logos, by the way, fantastic. Um, they utilize just enough of the old English font texture that most of these heavier bands want, but you definitely adjust it. You make it more original logo by logo. And that's another reason why I appreciate you as an artist. Low-key kind of tired of all the impact font and old English logos, but that's just me. Um, so with that in mind, it's like you're in this position that you're in, right? You got lucky. You got a really good spot. You reached out to Unique Leader Records and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, let's bring you on," and you've been working with artists just signing by signing by signing for some time now. So, as an artist, we're seeing this new generation, we're seeing this new wave of people who again might not have the financial resources to invest into an artist such as yourself. Which I mean, I've done a personal inquiry and I understand the pricing. But for some people, really intimidating. Either that or they're in a time crunch. We have AI art. AI art, from my understanding, through multiple apps, it pulls a whole bunch of major assets from the web. And it's like, okay, how does this look? Some people, they just utilize it for inspiration. They're like, okay, it's definitely a little bit weird, but we can work with that. Some bands will be like, you know what? This looks really weird. I want that. And some bands, like they look to it and like me, they're like, this has no soul in it, or something similar. What are your thoughts on AI art at this moment?
Um, so for me, when it first came out, it was like a bit of a joke. Um, it was also a little bit like this new artist that kind of erupted on the scene, who had this very like unique style, which we saw a lot with August Burns Red, and I think Make Them Suffer used one of those covers. And it was a little bit like, okay, you can tell this is a computer that's making it, it's very like fractal, fragmented, like data looking. Um, the point in which I felt like it became a little bit more scary in a sense was when it updated and then you started getting these renders that could literally imitate artists. And that was the point in which I felt like, it was actually really neat to see the art community sort of really rising up against this. I mean, there's still continued legal battles going on. I know there's I forget the name was, but there's this one artist I follow who's been like at the forefront of legal battles against AI art. And for me, I don't know, it just like even if you're a band without a budget, um, you can, there's like free assets out there. You can pull like from Creative Commons, like an old master's painting or whatever. There's plenty of different unique ways you could create art at a low budget. or use or create a cover at a low budget than going with AI art. I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that I've a very established clientele over the years, and a lot of my people that I work with um, are willing to pay the price that they pay for my work. And like I understand if you're not willing to pay whatever my price range. It's like no skin off my back. But if you really care about what you do and you care about like because what I don't understand is like if you're in a band, you're spending like a couple thousand on mixing and mastering, on vocal features or whatever, on like like sponsored whatever it is. You're spending quite a lot of money putting this album together to then put like a crappy piece of like generic AI art as your cover. It's like it's like it's just feels bad. It doesn't feel like you care enough. So for me, I don't know. I don't really feel like it's much of an excuse if like you don't have a budget as a band. I feel like there's plenty of ways you can work around it, especially considering the fact that AI art is not like ethical. That it's literally stealing work from artists and using their work and then like bashing it together into this, monstrosity that,
Yes.
is like
Yeah.
is created by a human. So
Right.
thankfully it seems like the trend is AI art is dying off, thankfully. I mean, from the get-go, I mean, I thought it was, it wouldn't be, it was like with NFTs or whatever, it's
Yeah.
like it's a trend for a little while, people like it then. So yeah, so I mean, I'm not too worried about it personally. I mean, I saw a little bit of a dip last summer when it first came out
Yeah.
in clients. And this year it's gone right back to how it was. So
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of artists who are suffering from that, usually especially artists who are up and coming. I know
Yes.
it's pretty difficult, but yeah, that's what I think. I mean,
Right. Yeah, and all things considered, you have a very you're very professional in your approach, because I'll tell you what, when AI art first came out, I immediately was like, yo, I'm like just starting out trying to do this, right? I'm trying to draw, I'm trying to do original pieces because I have a passion for not only doing original pieces very similar to yourself, Elrian or Caesar, but just the boom of what I consider to be kind of the kickstart to Black and Deathcore and all these bands investing into this renaissance, or I always use the word renaissance because that's the only thing I can think of. But the thing is, there were also plenty of pieces like these that I have on my wall in the Victorian era. There was the romantic era, right? Romanticism.
Yeah, romanticism, yeah.
Right. So there were all those pieces, and I saw the boom. I saw it really kickstart back in 2019 with bands such as Enterprise Earth with Luciferus, Shadow of Intense Melancholy, Shrine of Malice's Sheol, Lorna Shore's Immortal, which then would turn into a 2020 album because of delays. Um, and like I was seeing that, I'm like, whoa, this is really cool to see. Not only is there a genre, a subgenre of orchestral mixed with like Castlevania imagery, really. That's what I was seeing when I was listening to these albums. And I'm like, this is really cool. It's evil, but it's accepted. It's very like dark and just like hee, like we hate humanity and all that. But then it just boomed. It became so much bigger over time. And then, I mean, not only were these Black and Deathcore bands investing into this sort of artwork, you had Black and Death Metal, you had thrash, you had all the major genres, and they're like, you know what, this is actually really cool. You have, I think the biggest band that I can recall at this time would be Halloween, in which pardon me, they they commissioned Elrian, or is it Elrian or Elrian?
I don't know. I think he's from Germany, so probably one. I'd say Elrin, but
Elrin.
probably
Okay.
I pronounce words weird too. So
Right. I'll go with your pronunciation. So Elrin, he was commissioned through Halloween to compose that major piece with like the weird, almost disturbed looking ghost figure on the front, and then you just had all the imagery um incorporated into that piece, and it was just really cool to see that boom. So as that continued, you saw bands like Venom Prison investing. You saw bands like I'm trying to remember a couple. Those are like the only bands I can think of right now. But it's been booming. That art style being incorporated into metal albums has been booming. If not before, because I'm sure there were a couple artists that were investing, it definitely kickstarted back in 2019. And you saw this new era of all these bands utilizing that art style, and it was really iconic. So then when you have a shortcut, I would definitely call it a shortcut. And I'm glad we seem to be on the same playing field or same mindset with that. It's like with so many people embracing it at the beginning, especially smaller bands. Some people I personally knew who were like, "Yo, I don't have the money to get these nice ass albums. I need to do this." I'm like, "No, you don't. If you're an artist, if you're a musician, but you're also an artist, because musicians classify as artists or identify as artists as well, um, look into different methods. Maybe even see if you yourself are capable of doing something like that. I mean, hell, you're already jaded from the current job you have, or maybe your lifestyle is going a certain way that you would not prefer. So that's why you're making the music. Why don't you also just chicken scratch something together, kind of tap into that more hardcore punk art style and just create something, and then have the opportunity. Say your album booms, say your EP just explodes, everybody loves it. You also have the opportunity, the advantage of saying, hey, I did the vocals on this record, or I did the drums on this record, but we also made the album cover ourselves. We made the art ourselves. And you can also have that in your creative portfolio. Hopefully it doesn't add to some type of ego issue later in time, but you can always say at the end of the day that you invested that much more into your band. So when the AI art just wave, this avalanche came through, I like went into a deep depression. I was like, great. So now there's actually no point in participating in this field unless you happen to be one of these major artists like Caelan or like any of these other artists. It's like, what's the point? Like, nobody wants to invest. Nobody actually cares. And it's really the start. It felt like it was the start of something much bigger. And then it evolved into bands like Architects or bands like Cattle Decapitation, utilizing AI to do animations for visualizers for music videos. I was like, well, fuck me, dude. Like, it's just, it's becoming so much bigger. It's becoming so much more prosperous. It's being evolved into animation. And then the biggest, absolute biggest example that I can think of was with Marvel Disney Plus TV show Secret Invasion earlier this year. When you have a bigger company like that who is willing to just kind of cut a corner, as it seems, because that's what it feels like when people participate in this field, and you see what is actually a minute long, the longest Disney Plus show intro throughout all of the major TV shows. It's like a minute, minute 30, maybe even 2 minutes of just like AI art animation. I'm like, you dive in a little bit deeper. You're like, what is actually the point? What is actually the point when Disney themselves is willing to seemingly cut a corner and not even hire anybody with as much money as they have, and just not even hire anybody, just utilize a machine instead? I'm like, what the hell is going on, dude? How much more worse is this going to get? What is going to be the biggest thing that happens that correlates with AI art? And thankfully, it seems that Secret Invasion was the true plateau. A lot of people are like, this is Disney we're talking about, and they couldn't hire an actual artist to do something for the intro. They're just like, oh, this is weird. This is creepy. This is an invasive, like, this is the cancer to a certain degree of the creative industry. It's almost extraterrestrial because it doesn't look human, because it's not human. Why don't we go ahead and incorporate this into our new show about what is an invasion of millions of aliens, some of them with more hostile intentions, like AI, I'm sure, and just kind of embrace that. Like, ooh, this is so creepy. But for me, I like skip that intro almost every time. I'm like, what the fuck is this, Disney? Come on, man. That's not cool. You could have easily granted someone the opportunity to make something extraterrestrial. They could have even hired someone from like the more Fox branches of Disney, because they own Fox now. And they could have tapped into the artist or the graphic art designers, the SFX artist for any of like Independence Day or the Alien series, the Alien franchise, anybody who worked on Prey. But no, I just smacked my drink. Never mind. Um, it's like, it's just simply frustrating. It's frustrating to know that even the biggest companies in the world are willing to embrace this shortcut, or at least, I don't know. That's just my, those are my more aggressive opinions regarding that. But I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Uh, Actually, I'm also my being dark in here. I'm using the camera, so I'm just gonna adjust the lighting real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Daylight savings time is gone, folks. It's fall and winter
Yeah,
time,
right.
baby.
Like watching myself get like darker and darker. Like,
It's like the conversation is getting darker, so it
yeah.
fits.
um, yeah, no, I mean, not to keep harping on AR, but like it's thankfully it seems to be in the decline, and for artists like myself, like I also when I saw it come out, it really started affecting me as well. I was like, well, shit, like if this is the future of art, like what's the point in doing what I'm doing? Um, but at the same time, I tried not to have like a defeatist attitude about it. I mean, it actually in a lot of ways helped me because it's sort of that with a bunch of other situations. Um, One of which was actually a major band using work that I had created, um, that it wasn't exactly what they wanted, and they ended up actually using it and processing it through an AI filter from
Ah,
another
yeah,
artist, and then
right.
using that as the cover, and that for me was just like a wow, like is
Yeah,
that really what my work has come to? So for me, um, I was like in a bit of a depressed state where I was like, this is like ridiculous. But for me, it pushed me to be like, well, you know what? Instead of being like, this is gonna take over what I do, just kind of figure out what makes me what makes me unique and what makes me an artist and push that and instead of, doing all these covers where it's just the band's ideas and like the band's creative input, which is like, if you're going to use me as a Photoshop guy, you can just use AI art, like
yeah,
if you don't want to have a artistic input or ideas, then that's what AI is for. And
yeah,
it's accessible to you, someone who doesn't know how to do what I do. Um, so yeah, so I mean, it pushed me to be like, now I'm gonna figure out my voice and do what I want to do, and it worked. I mean, it worked out for me. I mean, I'm much happier actually with my process and the bands that I work with and the
yeah,
concerts I do. So I do have that to thank for AR art, and I'll say, as bad as it is with the like moral and sort of
ethically speaking. Yeah,
ethical issues, is that it is a new way of creating in a
yeah,
sense, and
right,
I mean it's a really like annoying to see how generic it is, but like it is a new tool, and
right.
it's gonna be there, and I don't know. Thankfully, hopefully it'll sit out of the public's sort of like reach of not reach, but public sort of like interest, I guess you could
Yeah,
say.
like hopefully it won't be. Hopefully it won't transpire to what we both fear, in which artists are just made obsolete.
Yeah.
Everybody's like,
Yeah.
well,
I don't think that it
if
will. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and of course that to me is the only scenario where you're allowed to have an ego, because it's like, well, at the end of the day, even if this is kind of becoming an issue, it can never truly create what I create. It can copy it, it can imitate it, but here's the thing. There are plenty of examples in the animal kingdom, even to where certain species will imitate others. They will imitate their own predators. They will imitate their own competition to survive. But so far, none of those mimicking species have ever successfully evolved and become those other things, right? You got the ant mimic spider. That's like the first thing I think of, or the spider mimic ant, whatever. No, it is an ant mimic spider. That thing will literally, it will pretend to be an ant to infiltrate major ant hills and stuff. But here's the thing, it'll never become an ant. Because why? It doesn't want to. Not really. And so far, to the best of my knowledge, excluding Chat GPT, there hasn't, and the more like major recent upgrades and updates to that software, there hasn't exactly been any sentient AI who hopes to just like eradicate the idea of graphic artists and commission artists. So, I mean, that's probably like what from what I've understood too recently with the writer's strike in Hollywood, dude. When Bryan Cranston was up on stage and he's like, "Hey, you can't give our jobs to robots. That's not right." Like that's what he was there for. And I can quote something very similar to that he stated. It's like at least people are fighting for it who have a platform instead of saying staying silent, you know. It's like that's the most important part is that there are people who are ethically inclined, and that's more of a perspective thing. So I can't say as a hive mind that we all have the same ethics and morals, but when you have people who have platforms like that, who have followings and have the reputation that they do and are standing up, that's the most important part. And that is why I am very grateful for this session, because we at least amateur, not even vaguely, like not even a pinch of salt seasoned um, graphic artist to well-renowned counterculture music graphic artist and art director for Unique Leader Records, that being Mr. Caelan Stokkermans. It's very important and vital to me that we do have people like yourself with a platform who aren't just avidly just being violent and aggressive and going out like fuck AI art or anything like that. But you're like, well, hopefully it doesn't become a major thing. That's
Well,
all
I
that
mean, yeah,
matters.
fuck AI art, but like,
Yeah.
I got you.
But it's really awesome to know that we have people at the top of the creative medium or near the top of the creative medium speaking for this niche that are against it. And that's all I can ask. That's all anybody could ask when they're wanting to get into this field, is that people are fighting against that in their own way. But kind of segueing from AI art, because that was a good chunk of conversation. We, Mr. Stockermans, have learned a lot about your legacy and your history tonight. We've learned about your creative process. We've learned of the lessons that you have brought unto yourself, basically, throughout your story. We've learned about one of your biggest endeavors yet in becoming the graphic art designer, graphic art director for what is one of the coolest counterculture music records in the scene at the moment, consistently scooping up artists. But not only that, obviously with bands like Lorna Shore, you've worked outside of Unique Lady Records. You've worked with other record labels before in recent times. So I guess one of my final questions of this session would be, what has been kind of like the most out of left field client that you've acquired, like maybe someone or something that you weren't expecting that reached out to you because of your reputation?
Ooh, like, are you asking like in terms of like a weird like sort of project or just like a different something that I wouldn't normally work on?
We can go with both.
Okay. Um, oh, I don't know. Look, primarily most of my clients come from the music industry. I mean, I just finished up two book cover commissions.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, I do get stuff that's outside of the music industry. I mean, I did a little stint for a while. I was like creative artist for this like fantasy collective called Canticles way back like it was like 2018, mostly when I was first starting out. So I mean, I've done a lot of different stuff. I mean, I've worked briefly with game concept art as well.
Ooh,
Yeah, nothing like major you probably know about. It's just like indie games or people
that's
working
still
on
cool, man.
personal
That's
projects.
really cool.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of do things that are not just music related, but I can't really think of anything that's like I've definitely had like crazy requests, like commission requests that have just been like stuff I've been like, I'm absolutely not doing that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the funniest like request I had probably that I usually go back to is when I was first starting out, I had this one band. They were like a death metal themed band or whatever, but their like band name was like, I think it was like Pericius or something, which is like Latin for like hedgehog. And their like logo was like a hedgehog. And they wanted me to redesign this like hedgehog logo. And me being like early days, I was like, of course, when I mean,
You got to
carbs,
eat.
so, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that one was pretty weird. A lot of the stuff that Travis comes up with to me from cattle is also pretty out there sometimes. Like one of his ideas was we were doing like a flyer for like an Australia and New Zealand tour that actually got canceled due to the pandemic. It was one
Right. I
last
remember that
year.
one.
He wanted to do like I think it was like a Reaper kangaroo or something. It was gonna be like a kangaroo and then it had like a cloak on and it was gonna have like a scythe or whatever. And I'm like, dude, I'm not doing that. Like really not my thing, but um so
That's
that's
great.
like, those are a few like I definitely like I've gotten some weird shit like over the years, but I usually I've learned how to kind of like be like, yeah, no, that's not really my thing. Like that, so but
Well,
yeah.
with that in mind, I think my final question of the night, because I'm sure you're working around the clock, especially with Unique Leader Records. You have like the reason we had to schedule for today, was because you have your meetings with Unique Leader Records. Um, so I guess my final question would be, as you move forward after such a big step joining the Unique Leader Records team, creatively speaking, what are some of the things that you're planning to do in the future to kind of like continue evolving and continue growing for yourself? Like, what are some milestones you are still wanting to conquer as an artist?
Um, so recently, this also kind of ties back to the AI art, but wanted to kind of start moving more towards traditional painting. I primarily use digital just because that's what I've learned on, and but I want to start doing, and it's also faster, easier to change things. But want to start doing more traditional painting, so that's kind of something I want to start moving into next year. Learning to do more traditional like painting and drawing and stuff. I mean, I know how to do it. It's just I don't do it as like my primary like commissions and for personal work.
Right.
Um, and yeah, so that's one thing I want to start getting into. A big thing I've always wanted to do work for Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast. Um,
That'd be
I
really
haven't
cool.
really, I mean, I have done stuff for like the Command Zone. I don't know if you play Magic, but it's
No,
the
unfortunately not.
it's the YouTube channel that I think Post Malone is played on. So
Oh shit.
yeah, so for one of the members of the Command Zone, I've done a playmat for her. Her name is Tag or whatever's Lady Danger. So I've done stuff like so I want to do stuff for Magic at some point, hopefully. Um that's a big milestone. I kind of want to start moving into doing more stuff for more legacy death metal bands and legacy metal
Ooh,
bands.
yeah.
Um, a lot of the bands I work with, a lot of the bands I've kind of come up working with are a lot of like up and coming, deathcore, like death metal and bands and stuff like that. So I mean, I would love to do stuff for like, oh, I don't know, like Mayhem or well, Death is no longer a band, but
Mm,
like a lot of like older, bigger legacy bands.
we're manifesting that
Which would
shit.
be, sorry, was it?
I said we're manifesting that shit
Yeah, hell
out
yeah.
into the universe. Woo.
Yeah, so hopefully, I mean, it's just for me, it's kind of just, I guess, a matter of time, just you sort of just keep grinding and grinding and grinding until you get those bigger bands. So yeah, so hopefully, that, and then, yeah, I don't know. I started considering moving into doing like tattooing maybe in the next couple of
Ooh,
years, start doing a little bit less commissions for bands and a little more like tattooing and focusing on just things that are not, music related because I've been doing this for so long. It's just,
it's exhausting eventually, even if you're
yeah,
successful. Like, there's a toll that comes with it. There's time taken out of your life that comes with it. So I completely
yeah,
understand that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So those are some things I kind of want to do in my future. Personally, just want to buy a house at some point, just kind of do things like that, so yeah, so that's me.
Hell yeah. No, it's awesome. And I don't know why this question popped into my head. Have you ever wanted to live in like a Victorian Gothic mansion? Or like what would be your dream house scenario, I guess?
Um, So I love where I'm living now. Actually, I live in a renovated warehouse in
Ooh.
downtown Cleveland. So, and it's like on the sixth floor. I mean, I don't know. I'm my camera's already been messing up, but I have a view of the city, which is
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
So yeah, living in Cleveland has its benefits because the rent here is like really cheap
Oh, hell yeah.
places. But yeah, so I really enjoy where I live right now. But my girlfriend really wants to get like a old like house or something. She's an interior designer and kind of
Oh, hell yeah.
renovate it and stuff. So yeah, so hopefully Victorian mansion would be sick. I don't know how many of those are around here in Cleveland, but yeah, something like that would be sick. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, that'd be so cool. And I'll tell you what, dude, at this point with the way the economy's going, especially for over here in Phoenix, Arizona, dude, like that size, that little huff is all you need to know. It
Yeah.
is booty over here, but I think dream house scenario would either be an off-grid log cabin or even just buying a haunted house. Like I would be down to have a haunted house, have some secret neighbors, and everybody's like, "Hey, who just threw that knife?" It's like, "Oh, that's just Jerry, dude. Don't worry about him." And or whatever.
Hell yeah.
Thank you for your time tonight. I know this probably most likely far exceeded your expectations as far as the overall run time, but I do appreciate everything we discussed tonight. It was really innovative. It was a solid start to the 60s as far as like the episode count, this being episode 60 period. Really cool stuff. Hope to be working with you in the future personally, as I'm trying to weasel my way into Unique Leader Records. We'll see what happens. So
For sure.
and yeah, was there anything you were wanting to state before we wrapped up?
No, I think that's about everything. We covered most of it.
Fantastic, dude. In that case, thank you to everybody for listening. This has been the Anatomy Crosscast, episode 60, with the one and only Caelan Stokkermans, the current graphic art director for Unique Leader Records, an amazing, famous graphic artist who indulges in a more classic style. And we will see you all for episode 61.